Hi, everybody. I wanted to take us back a day until Friday or Thursday when we first looked at these pages on page 114 and 117. There's a reason I started you there and looking at just the basic difference between what folk culture is and popular culture, right? There are elements of culture, even from the posters behind me that I'm looking at on this side, on my right. It's basically a traditional, this is a tribe, I think, in Australia, the Aboriginal people. That Spinifex is the name of the group. They're very isolated. They practice a form of animism, which is the word that I wrote back there. Indigenous, the word on the poster, you can't really see it, but the word on the poster is indigenous. Indigenous means that they are native to the land. So our indigenous people in the US are the Navajo, the Kumeyaay, the Sioux, right? The Dakota, the Lakota, the Cherokee, all of those indigenous tribes, the Inuit up in Alaska. They are all indigenous folk tribes. And the second type is popular culture. Popular culture has religions that spread very fast because people were either migrating or they were connected. And it made it easier with trade to sort of spread religions. The three big popularized religions are Christianity, which is symbolized by this poster right there, the big Jesus statue in Rio. And actually, the two behind me are folk. These are some of the oldest religions. Hinduism, indigenous first, Hinduism. Buddhism comes out of Hinduism, which is on this side. Sorry, I'm having trouble with my mirrors. And then Christianity and Islam are the ones that spread very fast and are popularized. Judaism is still a folk religion, but we'll get into that on the chapter of religion is very interesting. So anyway, popularized culture means that, as you've already seen, big groups of different types of people dependent on technology and the spread of one idea. Somebody else gets that idea, they spread it, whether it's a trend, whether it's a political viewpoint, whether it's a fashion trend, whether it's music. Folk, isolated, countryside, rural, popular, city, fast, spread, diffuses fast, right? So once you got those terms down, this was on Thursday, right? You took notes on these pages, you looked at a couple different examples, cultures that are isolated in the Himalayas, the Vietnamese and their music, from that to hip hop in New York City and how fast that spreads. Then you looked at the slideshow, and I did this intentionally to take you through some cultures, basically, difference between folk and popular. And then there's a video on the haka. The haka is a traditional Maori in New Zealand. Even though it's the native people of New Zealand, it's a very old chant, dance. It's a warrior cry that they do that has become popularized by this football team. Football is rugby there. Actually, no. All Blacks is rugby. Sorry, football is soccer. So this is a rugby team, and they've adopted this chant as like their cheer. It's supposed to be intimidation, connecting the warrior into the sport. But anyway, so folk can blend into popular culture, and popular culture can blend into folk. But usually there's some obstacles there, either physical obstacles or social obstacles, like maybe it's taboo to talk about certain things. And then I took you through like all these different slides of all these different countries, right? I was trying to just spark your curiosity about, life in other countries and how they live and what they wear. I didn't expect you to take that long going through it, but it's very interesting just to see, what kind of lifestyles people have. And this is all cultural, right? Cultural is the type of house they have. It's the technology they use. It's the food they eat. I wasn't expecting you to go through this and take notes on everything. I just wanted you to get some ideas. Look at the architecture too, is amazing in some of these countries, right? And there's folk, American folk right there, the old log cabin, right? That's considered a folk house of the Americas. Then, well, I'm just going to sort of skim down. That was supposed to take you about 10 minutes to go through these slides. The reason I'm going through all this is because you'll notice that I submitted your assignment back to you, because now that I'm about to tell you something about the article you read, I want you to revisit something. So after this slideshow, what you were to do was to go to these magazine articles, right? So you were to pick a couple of these magazine articles and, just look at the titles, maybe open a few of them. I mean, I did want you to open a couple of them. That's what the directions said. And I actually wanted you to map them on your map to tell me a little bit about it. But I also kind of wanted you to start looking again at, the way people live, the way things they wear. Look at the shoes on this Japanese man. Look at the clothes here. Look at this is an ancient city in Petra, which is in Jordan, and it's a city built into the cliffs. It's not a big city. It's basically a gigantic sort of cave that they carved out, and it's beautiful. How people greet each other in New Zealand. The native people were the Maori. They do the haka. Remote Amazon tribe, how they're actually adopting smartphones, so popularized culture coming in. Anyway, you were to pick any two of these that you wanted, kind of summarize them on your map. And then you were to do the big assignment. And the big assignment was this reading, right? And this was a little bit intimidating to look at because it was long. It's a college level article, but I gave you the audio on your directions on the green page right here to listen to as you read it. You were kind of doing three things at once. You were reading the article, maybe listening to me narrate it, right? And doing the questions. The reason I'm resubmitting this is because it's important to me that you really understand this next section. I wanted you to answer these two questions before you started. I was hoping that somebody would say, well, that doesn't seem appropriate that I'm using the word weird or strange to talk about other cultures. I think that's a natural thing that people do all over the world, right? The only thing that we know is the culture that we live in, unless you study cultures from around the world, which makes you an anthropologist, right? The people who go into anthropology study other cultures and why they do what they do. Sometimes it's like connected with behavioral psychology, right? Because you can look at how other people behave, look at things that maybe work in those societies, adopt them to your own. But I wanted you to think about how we talk about other cultures. So I kind of intentionally made that a little bit, I don't know how uncomfortable, if any of you were uncomfortable with the way that I asked that, but that's kind of my intent, because normally this is something that we are reading in class out loud. And people are talking about, oh, how strange this culture is, how strange that culture is. Why do they do that? This is so gross. All of the different things that people consider beautiful, right? The earlobes that hang down, the body paints, scarification that some tribes do to sort of delineate puberty, or that boys have gone through rituals, girls who go through rituals. There's like body mutilations that people do. Because I wanted you to look at this tribe called the Nacirema. For those of you that were really like looking up words, you would have gotten this a little bit quicker. But basically, you want to make sure that as you read through, right, you didn't need to know that this was satire. But after the yellow, I'm asking, when did you realize that you were reading satire? And some of you just thought satire was comedy, like, oh, it's supposed to be funny. But satire is a different kind of comedy. It's kind of a biting, mocking something that the person who is doing it thinks is absurd of another culture, right? So the reason this was satire is that this author who wrote this, I'm not even sure if his name really was Horace Minor, but he was using some of the things that he's basically in a couple places in here. He's talking about an anthropologist who is looking at this last paragraph was probably the most important part. It says, looking from far and above, from his high place in society, meaning like the college. He's very educated. He's from these universities. It's very easy for us to see from the safety of our developed civilization, right? Because we're so modern and so intellectual. It is easy to see the crudity and the irrelevance of magic, because that's when we don't understand something, or a lot of things are just kind of attributed to magic, and they'll call the religions magic, and without the power, the guidance of early man. Without the power, its power, meaning the power of those who sit way up here, we cannot master the difficulties that he has done. It's basically saying that it's because we study these primitive societies that we have become so advanced in our own development. And there's a reason he writes like this. He's writing because he's trying to sound very academic, because we are so smart, and he's making it sound like this culture that he's writing about is very barbaric and ignorant, right? And they bake their head in ovens, and they cut parts of their body out, and do all these things. And basically, if you realize it's satire, he's making fun of the Nacirema. And he's doing that only to show that the Nacirema have no business judging other people. And that's Nacirema is America spelled backwards. So if you do realize it's satire, and you realize that, he's talking about us, this whole article is about the Nacirema, it makes you, first you're kind of mad. You're like, what? We're not that weird. We're not awful like that. But he's doing it intentionally to show you what we do to other cultures that we write about that we don't really understand very well. So, he's pointing out, he refers to Murdoch a lot, who I think really was an anthropologist who did this a lot in his studies of these ancient cultures. And so anyway, the whole thing is describing things that are very, very typical, that we do all the time, that we don't think are weird, right? But when we talk to other countries or other cultures that are maybe, less like economically developed than we are, the idea of going into a barbershop and a woman putting her head up into this heated metal thing that looks like an oven is really just to get her hair curly, right? They're all doing, basically his premise is that everything the Nacirema do is for beauty and our own self, like fear that we're going to get old and that we're going to get sick and we're going to die and we want to be beautiful forever. So he's kind of making a very satirical point in how every culture judges other cultures, even us Americans. So anyway, satire, that's what it is. It's an important literary concept to understand. You should be looking at it in your English class too. There's all kinds of different satire. I wanted to just run you through some other pictures. This is satire. And again, remember, it's like either art or entertainment that is trying to send a message, and it's usually mocking something. Like this is actually called The Blind Leading the Blind. It's an old painting out of Amsterdam, Bruegel, about how silly it is for people who don't know what they are doing to try and pretend like they can lead other people ahead. So he's making a point that has nothing to do with being blind. He's basically using blindness as like an ignorance, right? That it's like the ignorant trying to tell the ignorant what to do. So that's what the satire is involved in here. Satire here is sort of poking fun at something else. It's smartphone on a stick. Who has the fairest profile pic? And it's the queen basically making fun of, it's not like the ha-ha comedy, right? That's not what satire is. Satire is more, okay, so what is the artist here making fun of? and he's making fun at our like ego, our need to always have attention and feedback for who is the most beautiful person. So he's making fun of kind of social media in a way, right? And our constant desire to be liked and admired by taking pictures of ourselves nonstop and talking about ourselves and what our best part of the day was. I pulled out a few more. Now, this is late night talk show. Cable things are often they're comedy, but they're biting comedy. Stephen Colbert is one of the more popular ones. They're all very political, and it's funny, but it's also making fun of something, right? So it's he's sending a message basically by poking fun at something. And I'm showing you two different ones here. This is one that is it's Obama on a stick of dynamite, basically saying, "Aha!" I have the bigger one, and it's like an Olympic, comparing it to like the Olympics. I think it was during the time of the Olympics that were in Russia, because here's President Putin. Basically, he's saying, you think you have the Ukraine, you're going to blow up, haha, because he took over the part of the Crimea because he felt like that was Russia. That was something that was very controversial. Europe got very mad at that. So he's basically saying, haha, you're gonna blow up. But what he's not realizing is that he did this even worse in Syria by basically trying to help in Syria by creating a bigger problem there. So that's poking fun of his policy in Syria. And then another one from the other political angle is, well, it's not really, it's more like today's, it's still very political, right? And it's making fun of this hypocrisy between the police saying don't shoot at them. They don't want the media to shoot pictures of what they're doing, but then I guess this would be symbolic of the Black Lives Matter saying don't shoot at me. So that's satire. Again, it's making fun of, in this case, sort of the hypocrisy of police brutality. And then, of course, there's the Nacirema. So satire is a very high level of comedy that is often making fun of something else. And you see it across political spectrums. You see it across all media, whether it's art, whether it's cartoons, whether it's video, right? It might be funny, but it's more kind of a biting funny. So this is also, it's like, okay, it's satire because it's making fun of the way that this question, by the way, you were expected to kind of look up. Remember, if you don't understand the question, please look it up. You need to, I say this in class too. I don't answer a lot of definitions. Like when you get down to the bottom and it's saying, when did you discover you were reading satire? I would have expected you to look up what satire was. It takes 2 seconds. You have Google, right? And then ethnocentrism. I did not really want you just to give me the definition of ethnocentrism. So nothing is marked off. I counted whether or not you did this, but I want you to take another step back, not just give me the definition, but tell me why this relates to the article we just read. Okay, so I want you to go back, and I'm going to go back down to these questions, right? And I want to reread now that you've like kind of heard my analysis of what satire is and what the article, the purpose of the article was, because I think it's kind of a difficult thing to go through this chapter when you're sort of in the center of your own cultural cycle, right? Same thing with representation. Right? And there's not necessarily a right or wrong answer here. Okay, I want you just to like show me that you're really thinking about these concepts and that you're connecting them back to the article. Okay, so do that, and that should literally take. You don't have to necessarily go through the whole article. I am adding, you'll notice that there's one more question added here because I want you to create, now that you know that like almost every paragraph was about, like, this was the belief underlying seems to be the human body is ugly. Every household has a shrine devoted to this purpose. By the way, I had sent you pictures that you would have gotten through our remind text of this very last slide here on the slideshow. This was the Nacirema, right? So the dentist, he was writing about the dentist from the point of view of somebody who would never have been to a dentist like the kind of dentist we go to, right? I told you that I lived in Mali for 2.5 years. They would never have been sitting in a chair like this with somebody like taking out their teeth. They went to somebody who, would do the best they can with whatever resources they had, which were, sometimes they would have access to a clinic or a dentist. But if you're talking about very rural places that are very underdeveloped, all of this would be considered very strange. So it's just the way that we write about culture that I wanted you to have an awareness about. This is the shrine, saying that we are fascinated, like we're obsessed almost with this shrine every day, wanting the holy water, right? So he's writing from the point of view as if he doesn't know what any of this is. He's just watching what these people do and, putting a perspective on it that is very, very different. The construction of the houses were wattle and daub, which is basically stucco, if you would have looked that up. The ovens that they bake their heads in, the doctor, sort of the hypocrisy between how we treat our bodies in this country, from very, very private as far as like things that we do in the bathroom to very, very hypersexualized in the media. And then the Vestal Maidens. And this is in the 60s. Remember, this is all written in the 60s. Even the toothbrushes. Back in the 60s, you still had toothbrushes that were made of hog hairs. So anyway, I did have some great conversations with the students who understood what was happening in the article. Text me when you are reading a paragraph and you have any questions or like, what the heck was he writing about here? I didn't understand that. But I do want you to go to the last part and you're going to see a question. Give me another thing that he would write about from the point of view of somebody on the outside. Like, what would they say of the way we do plastic surgery? What would he say of the way we do tattooing or piercing? How would he write that in a satirical way? Okay, so that's all. We're just kind of revisiting what we did on Thursday because I want you to understand cultural relativism, ethnocentrism, and these concepts that are so crucial when we're looking at culture. Okay, and then we'll go through and do a little bit more reading for tomorrow. Bye.